The auction hall on Kepler Station was packed with the wealthiest creatures from every corner of the galaxy. The air smelled like expensive perfume mixed with the metallic tang of recycled station oxygen. Holographic displays floated above each cage, showing off genetic lineages and championship bloodlines. This wasn't just any pet market. This was where the elite came to buy companions that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Near the front rows, a Corvinite diplomat adjusted his silk robes while his assistant held a datapad listing his preferred breeds. Behind him, a mining baron from the outer reaches tapped her clawed fingers impatiently against the armrest of her anti-gravity chair. Everyone here had money to burn, and they were ready to spend it on the finest creatures the galaxy had to offer. The auctioneer's platform glowed with soft blue light. Cages lined the walls, each one containing something rare and beautiful. Crystalline birds from the Andromeda sector sang in frequencies that made the walls shimmer. Six-legged felines from Proxima purred and shifted their coats through every color of the rainbow. But the real stars of today's auction were the Valorian hounds. These weren't just pets. Valorians were legendary across known space. They could form telepathic bonds with their owners, sensing danger before it happened, understanding emotions without words, and showing loyalty that put most sentient species to shame. A good Valorian could save your life, guard your family, and become your closest friend all at once. That's why they sold for fortunes. But quality mattered. Breeding mattered. Age mattered. And appearance? That mattered most of all. The blue-skinned Tellurian auctioneer raised all four of his arms dramatically. His voice boomed through the speakers with practiced enthusiasm. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all classifications, feast your eyes on Shadowmere. Pure bloodline, only 3 years old, descendant of not one but two galactic champions. His telepathic range is twice the normal distance. His reaction time is 0.03 seconds faster than breed standard. This magnificent creature represents the absolute peak of Valorian genetics. The crowd leaned forward. Bidding paddles flew up like a flock of birds taking flight. 50,000 credits? Do I hear 60? 60,000 from the gentleman in section 3. 70. 80. 90,000 credits. The bidding war lasted 5 minutes. Shadowmere sold for 240,000 credits to a Vraxian shipping magnate who smiled with all three of his mouths. One by one, the premium hounds were paraded across the platform. Each one perfect. Each one young and strong and beautiful. Each one selling for enough money to buy a small spacecraft. The auction lasted 3 hours. The wealthy buyers were happy, chattering among themselves about their new companions. The auctioneer was happy, calculating his commission. Even the hounds seemed happy, wagging their tails as they were led away to lives of luxury and pampering. But in the far back corner of the holding area, in the section where the lights didn't shine quite as bright, sat cage number 47. The auctioneer's assistant had marked it with a yellow tag. Yellow meant damaged goods. Yellow meant problem item. Yellow meant nobody wants this. Inside the cage lay Cass. She'd been a beauty once. 12 years ago, her silver coat had shimmered like moonlight on water. Her eyes had been bright and alert. Her body had been strong and graceful. Back then, she bonded with a station engineer, a kind Tellurian woman who treated her like family. They'd worked together, lived together, been inseparable for 8 wonderful years. Then her bonded partner died in an accident. Plasma conduit explosion. Quick and painless, they'd said. But for Kess, losing her bonded partner was like losing half her soul. The telepathic connection didn't just break. It tore. It left scars that went deeper than flesh. After that, life got hard. She'd been passed around. Temporary housing. Neglectful owners who wanted a Valorian's reputation without putting in the work. No proper food. No medical care. No love. Just survival. Now her once silver coat was matted and dull, clumped with dirt and neglect. Her right eye had clouded over after an untreated infection. Her back leg had been broken and healed wrong, leaving her with a limp that never went away. Scars crisscrossed her flanks from fights with other animals, accidents, and just the general brutality of living without anyone who cared. She was 12 years old. In Valorian terms, that meant she was old. Not ancient but past her prime. Past the age when people wanted to invest in a bond. Past the age when she could have puppies to sell. Past the age when she looked good in promotional photos. The assistant had wanted to skip her entirely. Just send her straight to disposal. But regulations said every creature had to be offered for sale first. So here she was, waiting for a rejection she already knew was coming. The auction wound down. The wealthy aliens started gathering their purchases and heading toward the exits. The auctioneer checked his timepiece and sighed. One more item to go. The damaged goods in cage 47. His team dragged the cage onto the platform with obvious reluctance. The wheels squeaked. The cage rattled. Kess barely lifted her head. She'd been through this before at other auctions. She knew how it ended. The auctioneer's enthusiasm died the moment he looked at her. His forearms dropped to his sides. His voice went flat. And, this is Kess, Valorian Hound. Approximately 12 years old. Previous bond severed due to owner's death. Some cosmetic issues. Bidding starts at 5,000 credits. Silence filled the auction hall. Not the excited silence of people deciding whether to bid. The uncomfortable silence of people looking away from something they didn't want to acknowledge. 1,000 credits? The auctioneer's voice had lost all its showmanship. He was just going through the motions now. A Vraxian merchant in the third row snorted loud enough for everyone to hear. She's half dead already. Not worth the feeding costs. I'd lose money just keeping her alive. Someone else laughed. Others nodded in agreement. 500 credits? The auctioneer was practically begging now. Surely someone needs a companion. Send it to disposal, a voice called from the back. Stop wasting our time with garbage. We came here for premium specimens, not charity cases. More laughter. More agreement. The remaining crowd started gathering their things ready to leave. The auctioneer looked at his assistant and gave a small nod. That was the signal. Auction failed. Send it to disposal. In the back of the auction house, a large chute waited with a dark opening. That's where the unsold creatures went. The damaged ones. The ones too old or sick or ugly to sell. Nobody talked about what happened after they went down that chute. Nobody wanted to know. The assistant moved toward Kess's cage with a prod stick in hand. This part of the job always made him uncomfortable, but regulations were regulations. Can't keep creatures that won't sell. Economics didn't care about feelings. Kess watched him approach. She didn't fight. Didn't growl. She'd used up all her fight years ago. She just closed her one good eye and waited for whatever came next. Then a voice cut through the noise. Quiet at first. Human. Coming from the cheap seats way in the back where station workers sometimes watched on their lunch breaks. Wait. Everyone turned to look. And that's when everything changed. Jake's living space wasn't anything special. Most people wouldn't even call it an apartment. It was just a single room in the maintenance sector where the station's repair workers lived. The whole space measured maybe 12 feet by 12 feet. Not much bigger than some of the storage closets on the upper levels where the rich folks lived. The room had the basics and nothing more. A metal bunk that folded down from the wall when you needed to sleep and folded back up to save space during the day. A food processor the size of a microwave that could turn nutrient paste into something that almost tasted like real food. A shower stall in the corner that made horrible rattling noises whenever the water pressure kicked in. The walls were bare metal with a few dents and scratches from previous tenants. The floor was cold synthetic tile that never quite felt warm no matter how high you set the environmental controls. But Jake kept it clean. He didn't have much, but what he had he took care of. The bunk was made every morning. His few work uniforms hung neatly on hooks. His tools were organized in a small chest by the door. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. And most importantly, it was safe. The door locked. The environmental systems worked. Nobody bothered him here. Now he had company. Jake opened the door and guided Kess inside with gentle patience. He moved slowly, keeping his body language relaxed and non-threatening. He'd seen scared animals before. You couldn't rush them. You couldn't force them. You had to let them come to you in their own time. Kess limped through the doorway and stopped, her one good eye scanning the small space. Her nose twitched, taking in all the unfamiliar smells. Her ears swiveled, listening for danger. Every muscle in her body was tense, ready to react if this turned out to be another bad situation. But Jake just closed the door quietly and sat down on the floor, making himself small and unthreatening. It's okay, girl. Take your time. Look around. This is home now. Kess stood there for a long moment, uncertain. Then, as if her legs just couldn't hold her up anymore, she limped to the farthest corner of the room and collapsed. The sound she made was somewhere between a sigh and a groan. It was the sound of someone who'd been carrying a heavy weight for too long and finally had permission to put it down. Jake's heart broke a little at that sound. But he kept his voice steady and calm. Okay, girl. Let's see what we're working with here. He spent the next hour doing a careful examination. He'd worked on machinery his whole adult life, but bodies weren't that different in some ways. You looked for damage, assessed what could be fixed, and figured out what you had to work around. The scars were the first thing he noticed. They crisscrossed her flanks and legs in a pattern that told a story of years of hardship. Some were thin and faded, probably from her younger days. Others were thicker, more recent. But none of them looked infected. They'd healed, even if they'd healed poorly. That was something, at least. Her clouded eye was probably permanent. Jake had seen similar injuries in workers who'd been hit with chemical splashes. Once the cornea got damaged that badly, there wasn't much you could do without expensive medical procedures. And nobody was paying for expensive procedures on an old hound that cost 100 credits. The limp came from her back right leg. Jake felt along the bone carefully and Kes flinched but didn't pull away. There it was. A break that had healed wrong. The bone had fused at a slight angle, probably because she'd never gotten proper medical care when it happened. It would always hurt her. Always make her walk funny. But it wasn't getting worse and she'd learned to live with it. The malnutrition was obvious. Her ribs showed through her matted coat. Her hip bones jutted out sharply. Her coat itself felt brittle and dry, like straw instead of fur. She probably hadn't eaten a decent meal in months. Maybe longer. But Jake could see past all of that. He'd always been good at seeing potential in broken things. That's what made him a good mechanic. Where others saw garbage, he saw possibility. Under all the damage and neglect, Kes had good bones. Strong structure. Her skull was well-shaped, showing intelligence. Her paws were large and well-proportioned. Even lying collapsed in his corner, there was something about the way she held herself. A dignity. A pride that hadn't been completely beaten out of her. You were beautiful once, weren't you? Jake said softly, starting to work his fingers through the worst of the tangles in her coat. Someone loved you. Someone took care of you. I can tell. At the word loved, Kes's ear twitched. Just a tiny movement, but Jake noticed. She was listening. She understood. He kept talking to her as he worked, his voice low and soothing. I know things got bad. I can see that. But that wasn't your fault. You deserved better than what you got. And I'm going to do my best to give you better. Starting right now. Jake's stomach rumbled, reminding him that he'd skipped lunch to attend the auction. He stood up and went to his small storage locker, pulling out his food rations for the week. Synthetic protein bars. They weren't great, but they were nutritionally complete and safe for most carbon-based life forms. He checked the packaging once out of curiosity. He unwrapped one and broke it in half. The bar smelled vaguely of artificial vanilla and something that might have been trying to be chocolate. Jake kept half for himself and brought the other half to Kes. She sniffed it carefully, her nose working overtime to analyze this strange food. Then she looked up at him with her one good eye. The look was clear as day. Is this really for me? Am I allowed? Jake's throat tightened. How many times had she been punished for taking food? How many times had she learned that nothing was truly hers? Go ahead, he said gently. It's yours. Nobody's going to take it away. Kes ate slowly. Not the frantic gulping of a starving animal, but the careful, measured eating of someone who'd learned to make food last because you never knew when the next meal was coming. She chewed thoroughly. She savored it. And when she was done, she looked at Jake with something that might have been gratitude. That night, Jake faced a problem. His room only had one blanket. It was thin and scratchy, but it was all he had. The station's environmental controls kept things just barely warm enough to sleep without one, but it wasn't comfortable. Jake had learned to sleep in his work jacket on cold nights. He looked at Kes, still curled in her corner, and made a decision. He folded the blanket and brought it over to her, tucking it gently around her thin body. Here you go, girl. You need this more than I do. Then he pulled on his work jacket, zipped it up, and climbed into his fold-down bunk. The jacket wasn't warm enough. He shivered through most of the night, drifting in and out of uncomfortable sleep. But when his alarm went off at 6 in the morning for his maintenance shift, Jake discovered something that made the cold night completely worth it. Kes had moved during the night. She dragged the blanket across the small room to his bunk. And she'd pressed herself against the wall side of his bunk, sharing her warmth with him. Jake lay there for a moment, feeling that warm weight against his back, and felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been frozen for a long time started to thaw. He reached back and gently scratched behind Kes's ear. We're gonna be okay, girl. Both of us. I promise. And for the first time in years, Jake believed his own promise. They'd figure this out together. It started so quietly that most people didn't even notice at first. Just a low pulse humming through the station's infrastructure. The kind of sound that blended into the constant background noise of life on a space station. Ventilation systems. Recycling processors. Distant machinery doing its endless work to keep 12,000 people alive in the vacuum of space. Jake was 3 levels down in the lower maintenance bay, elbow deep in the guts of a cargo lift that had stopped working that morning. Burned out circuits. Happens all the time when people overload the lifts with cargo that exceeds weight limits. He had his diagnostic scanner in one hand and a replacement circuit board in the other, trying to figure out which connections went where. Kes lay nearby watching him work. She'd been doing that a lot lately. Just watching. Learning his routines. In the 3 weeks since he'd brought her home, she'd gotten stronger. Her coat had started to shine a little. The limp was still there, but she moved with more confidence now. Then the low pulse became a wail. The lights throughout the maintenance bay shifted from their normal white to deep emergency red. Shadows jumped and twisted across the walls. The pleasant hum of normal operations transformed into something urgent and terrifying. Jake dropped his tools and stood up fast enough to bang his head on the underside of the lift. What the? The station's intercom crackled to life. Static interference made the voice hard to hear at first, which was never a good sign. When the station's communication systems worked properly, announcements came through crystal clear. All personnel, this is Station Commander Hayes. We have a critical failure in Reactor Section B. Plasma containment is failing. Repeat, containment is failing. All non-essential personnel evacuate to safe zones immediately. Jake's blood went cold. Plasma containment. Those were words you never wanted to hear in an emergency announcement. The plasma cores were what powered the entire station. They were also incredibly dangerous. The magnetic fields that contained the superheated plasma were the only things keeping that energy from vaporizing everything nearby. His wrist communicator chirped with an incoming call. Jake slapped the accept button. Yeah. Thompson, get to engineering now. The voice belonged to Derek, one of the senior engineers. Jake had worked with him for 2 years. He'd never heard Derek sound scared before. But he sounded scared now. Really scared. On my way. Jake started running toward the nearest lift. Behind him, Kes scrambled to her feet and followed, her claws clicking on the metal floor. No, girl. Stay here. It's not safe. But Kes ignored him completely. She limped after him as fast as her bad leg would allow, and Jake didn't have time to argue. He jabbed the lift button repeatedly as if that would make it arrive faster. The ride up to the engineering deck took forever. The lift moved at its normal speed, but every second felt like an hour. Jake could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. Through the lift's small window, he could see other station personnel running through corridors, heading toward designated safe zones. Parents carried children. Workers helped elderly residents move faster. The lift doors finally opened onto chaos. The engineering deck was the nerve center of the entire station. Usually it was a calm, controlled environment. Engineers monitored systems on holographic displays. Technicians made minor adjustments. Everything ran smooth and quiet. Not today. Today, every screen flashed red warnings. Automated alert systems screamed at volumes that made it hard to think. At least a dozen engineers crowded around their workstations, their fingers flying across controls, trying desperately to regain control of systems that were failing faster than they could respond. Commander Hayes stood at the central command station. She was a tall woman, usually calm and composed. Jake had seen her handle station emergencies before with the kind of cool professionalism that made everyone feel safe. But right now her face had gone pale. Her hands gripped the edge of the console so hard her knuckles had turned white. Derek stood beside her, frantically working a holographic interface. He swiped through screens of data, each one showing more bad news. Talk to me, Derek, Hayes said, her voice tight. What's the situation? Derek pulled up a 3-dimensional map of the station's reactor section. The entire display rotated slowly, showing all the different levels and compartments. One entire quadrant of the reactor pulsed angry red, like an infected wound on the station's body. The plasma conduit network suffered a cascade failure, Derek explained, his words coming fast. Started in Conduit 7, spread to the entire western grid within 90 seconds. The automated safety systems are offline. Looks like whatever caused the initial failure also took out both the primary and backup safety controls. The core is overheating. At the current rate, we'll reach critical mass in 47 minutes. Someone behind them cursed quietly. Jake felt sick. Critical mass meant explosion. Meant containment failure. Meant superheated plasma tearing through the station's infrastructure like tissue paper. Commander Hayes kept her voice level, but Jake could hear the strain underneath. What do we need to do? Someone needs to manually access the emergency shutdown panel in Sector B-17, Derek said. Physical reset of the magnetic containment field. It's the only way to stop this. Then send a team. Commander. Derek cut her off, and the way he said it made everyone in engineering stop what they were doing and listen. Sector B-17 is flooded with radiation. The containment failure is dumping radiation into that entire section. Current levels are reading 800 rem per hour. The sick feeling in Jake's stomach got worse. He didn't know much about radiation exposure, but he knew enough. Enough to know that 800 rem per hour was deadly. Derek continued, even in a hardened radiation suit, the best suit we have, anyone who goes in there has maybe 10 minutes before acute radiation syndrome sets in. The panel is 12 minutes from the nearest access point through collapsed corridors. And that's if everything goes perfectly. If they don't get lost. If they don't hit any blocked passages. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were the continuing alarms and the frantic beeping of failing systems. Commander Hayes closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them again, her expression had hardened into something grim and determined. What about drones? Send and repair drones to do it remotely. Derek shook his head. The EMP from the initial failure fried everything electronic in that section. Drones won't work. Remote systems won't work. It has to be manual. Someone has to physically go in there and throw the switches. The engineering deck went completely silent. Everyone understood what Derek was saying. What he wasn't saying directly, but what everyone heard anyway. Someone would have to go into Sector B-17. Someone would have to walk through lethal levels of radiation. Someone would have to stay in there long enough to reset the containment field manually. And whoever did it wouldn't be coming back. Not alive. Not healthy. Acute radiation syndrome would kill them. Maybe in days. Maybe in hours. But it would kill them. Commander Hayes's voice came out quiet, almost a whisper. How many people are on this station? The heavy airlock door sealed shut behind them with a sound that made Jake's stomach drop. It was a hiss followed by a deep metallic clunk. Final. Permanent. Like the sound of a coffin closing. He knew what that sound meant. Once you were on the other side of that door, there was no quick escape. No emergency exit. You were committed. Jake's wrist display lit up with warnings immediately. The small screen showed radiation levels climbing in real time. 200 rem. Then 300. The numbers kept rising as they stepped into the first damaged corridor. 400 rem per hour. His suit's internal systems kicked in, doing their best to shield him from the invisible death flooding the air around him. But these suits weren't designed for this level of exposure. They were meant for minor radiation leaks, small accidents, brief exposures. Not this. Not walking into the heart of a containment failure. The path ahead looked like something from a nightmare. The corridor that should have been clean and organized was now a disaster zone. Ceiling panels had collapsed, creating barriers of twisted metal and exposed wiring. Some panels hung at dangerous angles, held up by nothing but luck and a few stubborn bolts. They swayed slightly as Jake and Kess moved past them, like they might come crashing down at any moment. Electrical conduits that should have been safely tucked behind walls now hung exposed, sparking and spitting. They dangled like the mechanical intestines of some giant beast that had been torn open. Each spark sent shadows dancing across the walls in jerky, unsettling patterns. The smell of burning insulation filled Jake's helmet, acrid and chemical even through his suit's filters. Warning lights pulsed everywhere. Red lights. Yellow lights. Orange lights. Each one flashing its own urgent rhythm. Danger. Turn back. Death awaits. The lights reflected off his helmet visor, making it hard to see clearly. Jake had to squint against the glare. He pulled up the station map on his helmet's heads-up display. The holographic overlay showed the official route to Sector B-17. It went straight ahead through the main corridor, then took 2 left turns and 1 right. 12 minutes if everything went perfectly. Longer if he hit obstacles. And from what he could see, there would be plenty of obstacles. But Kess wasn't following the official route. The old hound moved ahead of him with surprising purpose. Her limp was still there, but she moved with confidence, like she knew exactly where she was going. She turned down a side corridor that Jake almost missed. It was narrow, partially hidden behind a collapsed support beam. His HUD didn't show any corridor there. According to the official station schematics, that passage didn't exist. Kess, wait. Jake called out. His voice sounded strange inside his helmet, muffled and close. That's not the right way. The map shows we need to go straight. But Kess didn't stop. She looked back at him once, her one good eye meeting his through his helmet visor. And Jake felt something in his chest. That warm sensation he'd been feeling more and more over the past 3 weeks. It wasn't just emotion. It was deeper than that. More solid. Like information flowing directly into his mind without using words. Trust me. He didn't hear the words. He felt them. Knew them. The same way you know your own thoughts. Jake made a split-second decision and followed her into the narrow passage. The maintenance shaft Kes had chosen was tight. Really tight. Jake had to turn sideways to fit his bulky radiation suit through. The walls pressed against him from both sides. His oxygen tanks scraped against the metal ceiling with a horrible screeching sound. Loose debris crunched under his boots. This definitely wasn't an official corridor. This was the kind of passage that maintenance workers used when they needed to access areas between the main sections. Hidden routes that didn't appear on passenger maps. But it was bypassing huge sections of the damaged area. On his HUD, Jake watched his position marker move towards Sector B-17 much faster than the official route would have allowed. The passage cut straight through areas that would have been blocked or dangerous. Kes was saving them precious minutes. Jake's mind raced. How did you know about this passage, girl? Kes glanced back at him again, and that's when Jake felt it more strongly than ever before. Images flooded his mind. Memories. But they weren't his memories. He saw these corridors through different eyes. Saw them years ago when they were new and clean. Saw a blue-skinned engineer with 4 arms working here, installing these hidden maintenance passages. Emergency access routes that weren't in the official records. The engineer's name was Velkara. She was Tellurian, careful and methodical in her work. And beside her, helping her, watching everything she did, was a young Valorian hound with a silver coat that shimmered like moonlight. Guess she'd been here before. 15 years ago. When she was young and strong and bonded to Velkara. She'd watched her bonded partner build these passages. Walked them hundreds of times during maintenance rounds. And she remembered. Despite everything that had happened to her. Despite the years of neglect and abuse. Despite losing her bonded partner and being passed around like unwanted cargo. She remembered every turn. Every passage. Every shortcut. Jake felt tears stinging his eyes. You remember everything, don't you? Every moment with her. Every corridor you walked together. Through their connection he felt Kes's response. Not words but pure emotion. Loss. And now purpose. She'd lost Velkara, but she could still use what Velkara had taught her. She could still save lives with that knowledge. They emerged from the maintenance shaft into another damaged corridor, but they were much closer to Sector B-17 now. Jake's HUD confirmed it. They'd cut at least 4 minutes off the journey. 4 minutes that might mean the difference between success and failure. Between life and death for everyone on the station. Good girl, Jake whispered. Such a good girl. Let's finish this. They moved deeper into the radiation-soaked corridors, human and hound working as one, connected by something that shouldn't have been possible. And with every step that impossible bond grew stronger.